A house where children cry. I was standing in front of the apartment building where my seniors lived. There is something in the house, and I want you to come take a look. That's what I was told, but as I stood in front of the apartment, I could already sense an unpleasant presence. Even though I had heard nothing, I knew there was something impersonal here. The sky should have been dazzlingly blue and clear, but the area around the apartment building was dimly lit. To my eyes, the space seemed to be a mixture of green and brown, like a shaded area in the mountains. This strange space, invisible to other people, is often seen in haunted places and forbidden areas. It is a place that no living person should approach. I wouldn't want to go near there if I could. I think I'll go home after all. I mumbled a few words, but I couldn't allow that to happen. Even if I knew this apartment was a bad place, I had no choice but to go in. My senior's request means absolutely, and I have no right to veto it. When my senpai told me to come, I prepared myself and stepped into the spooky apartment. A bright and lively female senior at a part-time job I had in high school was a highly psychic person. She could see spirits as clearly as any living person. Sometimes I can see them too, but that is something only a few of my friends know about. I usually try not to tell anyone about it, and I try not to let them know about it. Of course, bizarre phenomena occur one after another. Even at my part-time job, I kept it a secret, but since I am easily possessed, I can't just plunge into places where there are unwanted signs. Therefore, I tried to walk around avoiding such places during my part-time job. Then, since my senior could see the spirit clearly, he would understand the funny situation. Other people would bump into it, but only I would walk around avoiding it normally. My senpai immediately realized that I was psychic. When she first asked me if I could see, I explained that I didn't want people to know too much about it, so she didn't go around telling people. But then, as it happens, she would say something to me every time I saw her. She finds it amusing that I don't like it. She would say something like, "There is always a man standing on the edge of the water tank near the store." Or, "The customer in the back room has a bad spirit with him, you should go check it out. Have you noticed that there are 2 more women in the bathroom aisle today? Hey, go clean it up." He always said it happily, with a grin and a smile on his face. I was still in high school and didn't have a car, so he is one of those kind people who would drive me around when I wanted to buy something big. However, on the way home, he would go out of his way to pass through intersections where there were non-human beings, give me unwanted explanations, and take me on a tour of haunted places. I can't speak for others either. But they have a good personality, I thought. And she is the one who abandoned me without a moment's concern when I was possessed by a boy who looked like a god of death between the altars in my parents' house. That boy, it seems, was not a very good one, as seen through the eyes of a senior psychic. Her argument was that what if her family got involved, but she should at least be concerned. My part-timers told me that we were very close, but I never once thought of her that way. I was nothing more than her toy. One day, one of my senpai grabbed me firmly by the shoulders and said, "Hey, I have a favor to ask you." She said, "Hey, I have a favor to ask you." I frowned at her with a bad feeling, but she showed no sign of letting go. She smiles and grabs me by the shoulders, a request that probably only I can do, and one that I most certainly do not want to do. My bad premonition is often right. I can already tell by the look on her face without even asking. She says, "Actually, my baby is 1.5 years old now, and she's been crying a lot lately. It feels like she's crying because she's scared of something, and I can sense her presence, but I can't see her. So, can you take a look around the house for me?" I knew it. My hunch was right. But if my senpai, who was highly psychic, couldn't see, there was no way I could. And I don't want to get involved in that kind of thing. No, if you can't recognize your psychic senior, there's no point in going. I shook my head. My rejection should have been clear on my face. But senpai did not back down and continued talking. But, you know, if we are not on the same wavelength, there are times when I can't see. It's fine if it's just me and my husband, but what if something happens to our kids? Senpai stares into my eyes without blinking. It's as if he's telling me it's my fault. Oh, I guess I'll never get away with it. I was determined. She is a person who does not care what the other person says, and wills her own will. I had to go along with her requests many times, especially if they were from junior staff like me, who had no say in the matter. In the end, unable to put up much of a fight, I told myself it was for the sake of my little boy, and we went to my senior's apartment. My senior's house is on the 5th floor of an 8-story apartment building along the river. Standing in front of the apartment building, it seemed somehow dark, even though it was chosen by a senior who was highly inspired. The river flowing right next to it is a man-made river and has a deep green color. I sensed a not-so-good atmosphere and wondered if that was the reason. Then, next to the assembly post at the entrance, I could see something invisible standing there. Of course the senior staff must know about this, so why not say so first? I get sick when I am affected by something impersonal, and my senpai knew that, too. And yet, she let me come to the apartment without telling me anything. Well, I guess such things are not important to her. I kind of knew it, but I feel like I'm being treated too poorly. I still think I should go home. I can't. I sighed heavily as I had no choice but to follow my senpai. As soon as I got on the elevator to go to the 5th floor, my ears started ringing and the sound gradually became louder. Ah, there he is. I braced myself. I really don't like going to a place where I know something is there. I felt like I was being sacrificed. I arrived at my senpai's room, took a deep breath, and rang the chime. Then, my senior came out right away and welcomed me with a smile. There was a 1.5-year-old child with her, who had suddenly started crying, but she seemed to be in a good mood and was being held by her senior. If he's not crying, does that mean he's not there now? I thought so, but I wanted to leave as soon as possible, so I looked around the house. Somehow there is a sign of him. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find anything impersonal. It looks like nothing is there right now, I said, and he muttered, I guess so, and led me to the living room in the back of the house. I had expected this, but it seemed that they would not let me go home until they found something. We decided to wait a bit and senpai offered me sweets and coffee. I can't see it, but I'm sure something is nearby, and I continue to have small ringing in my ears and a headache. Even though I have experienced this often since I was a child, I still can't get used to it. I envy those who, like my senpai, are highly psychic but do not get physically ill. For the next 30 minutes, we talked about our part-time jobs while eating the snacks offered to us. They talked about how some of the employees had recently started dating each other, how their part-time job pay was not going up at all, and other such nonsense. I'm not really interested, so I'm getting bored. I want to go home as soon as possible, or so I thought. Suddenly, the child started crying loudly. I looked at the child's face in surprise, and saw my senior also wrinkling her brow and looking at the child. Something had entered the house. As I put a lot of pressure on my body, I hear a sound from the corridor as if something is being dragged along with me. My back shudders, and at once my entire body is covered in painful goosebumps. The presence of whatever is in the hallway seems to have come straight in from the next room, rather than from the front door. And as the sound gets closer, I see a black shadow on the frosted glass part of the door. Senpai, is that? When I said this, he put his index finger to his mouth and let out a gasp. Shh. I kept my mouth shut and the black shadow moved to the far end of the corridor. After the sound of "Sue, Sue," as if something was being dragged again, it suddenly became quiet, but I still felt a strange presence in the corridor. Then, a senior. Then, the senior said, go on, without a word. What? There is definitely something there, and to be honest, I don't want to go. No, I heard a dragging sound and saw a shadow, so that's why the kids are crying, he said. I said, meaning I didn't want to go. What's the point if you don't know what's out there? Come on, come on. My senpai forces me to stand up and pushes me toward the hallway. Isn't it a crime to force a minor to do something? I have no choice but to open the door and step out into the hallway, where I feel a chill in the air. I felt a piercing pain in the back of my head. Why did this happen? Regretting it, I can't help myself anymore. I don't want to go, but I can't leave my child crying in front of me, so I take a deep breath and then step out. I feel a strange presence in the bathroom at the end of the hallway. I quietly walked down the hallway to the bathroom. I can't determine if it is malicious or not, so I want to check it out without being noticed if possible. I slowly opened the door to the bathroom, trying not to make a sound. Then cold air comes out from inside and hits my hand softly. It was as if I had put my hand in a river in the middle of winter. My headache is getting worse and worse. Then, as I quietly peeked inside, I saw a man dressed in black standing facing backward. From the way he was standing and the way he was dressed, he appeared to be a young man. I usually see spirits only vaguely, but I could see them clearly, so why couldn't my senior, who was highly psychic, see them? My senior said, sometimes you can't see unless you are on the same wavelength, so I guess I am on the same wavelength as the man, but I am not happy at all. I opened the door knowing that he was here, but I still felt fear when I saw him in front of me. It is a relief, at least, that I do not recognize the face of the impersonal being. My friends, who know my secret that I am psychic, ask me if I am not afraid of them, but if I could see their faces, I would still be afraid. The man standing backward does not look so bad, but he is dark and downcast and looks as if he is about to jump off the apartment. Somehow, being near him makes me feel heavy, but I don't think it's because I'm looking at the man lying on his back. I feel like I'm being dragged along by the man. With that thought in mind, I quietly closed the door so that the man would not notice me and went back to the living room where the senior was. When I told her that the man in the bathroom did not seem to have any malicious intent, but was just there, and that he was a dark, downcast young man, she said, "Hey, that's a lot of tears." He smiled as if he were a stranger to me. He laughed as if he were talking about something else. She probably had no idea how I had felt going to the place where the impersonal things were. I felt strangely angry. "I'll never come here again, even if you ask me to," I shouted in my mind, because I couldn't say it out loud. At any rate, the man in the restroom seemed harmless enough, but it might not be good if he stayed there for too long. I was afraid that I might be dragged into that dark and downcast feeling. You may end up in a similar state, regardless of your intentions. The child cried the whole time while the senior and I were talking. Since the child was my senior's child, it was not surprising that he was highly psychic, but the fact that he noticed and cried before us suggests that he must be able to sense signs quite sensitively. Many small children under the age of 5 can see things that are not human, but it is not good for them to be able to see things that other people cannot see. I think it would be best if they could not see when they grow up. While fussing over the crying child, "Please let the power of this child disappear," I prayed. And the reason why my senior chose that dark apartment was because the rent was cheaper than the market price. He said he was fine with it, so it didn't matter. But I think it is better to think about why it is cheaper before choosing an apartment, rather than just jumping in because it is cheaper. When I arrived at the senior's apartment, I was curious not only about the apartment but also about the man-made river flowing right next to it. The river was a deep green color, and I sensed a not-so-good atmosphere. I heard from my senpai that the rent was cheap. He said, "It's cheap because of what's going on, isn't it?" I asked. And the senior said. He said, "Yes, that's right." I heard that there were 3 people who threw themselves from the rooftop into the river below, and I wonder why they jumped into the river instead of the road where they could surely die. Maybe they thought it would be easier to clean up afterwards? I answered without changing any color of my face. I guess she really doesn't care if someone died there or if there are non-human beings. And when I heard that story, I thought, ah, so that's why you were curious. My psychic sense is half-baked, so I didn't know until I heard this fact, why I was curious about an ordinary man-made river. It is a place where people throw themselves into the river, and their souls, unable to leave the river, call out for another person. It must have become such a place. Perhaps I, who was curious about the river, was also called by those victims. When I said a dirty green river, he snickered at me as if I were an idiot. He snickered at me as if I were an idiot. I don't care if they find out. The water's not muddy and I can see concrete at the bottom of the river. If you don't want people to know that you are psychic, you have to make the switch. It was frustrating to see my senpai grinning and smiling, but it seems I also didn't understand that I was seeing things differently from the others. Switching? What in the world am I switching? I said, swearing in my mind as I walked out of the house. On the way back home, I took another peek at the river and found that the water was indeed clear. I had just been told by a senior colleague that the river water was not muddy, so I guess I could see the true state of the river. This is why I can't talk about anything else. I wish all my half-assed powers would just disappear, along with all my bad memories. Then, as I headed to my part-time job, it occurred to me. I wondered if the other residents of the apartment building knew that a number of people had jumped to their deaths in the river right next to it. Maybe the less they know anything about it, the happier they can live their lives. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.